I live in a beautiful, like, two-story craftsman house here in LA, and I have three other roommates. One of them is my boyfriend. Our house is $4,500, like, total, and there's four roommates total, and we split it four ways evenly. So we each pay 1100. My boyfriend and I share the like master bedroom, the larger bedroom. Yeah, I've lived in this house for 2 years now. It's been great. I love my place, and that's also why I'm kind of doing the commute from LA to Irvine, because I really love the community I've built out here.
Welcome to the Personal Finance for PhDs podcast, a higher education in personal finance. This podcast is for PhDs and PhDs to be who want to explore the hidden curriculum of finances to learn the best practices for money management, career advancement, and advocacy for yourself and others. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Roberts, a financial educator specializing in early career PhDs and founder of Personal Finance for PhDs. This is Season 19, Episode 2, and today my guest is Maggie Canady, a rising second-year grad student at the University of California, Irvine, and we break down her budget. Maggie gives us a peek into her life via her top 5 expenses each month, which are rent, car insurance, groceries, utilities, and travel. Despite taking a pay cut when she started grad school, Maggie maintains close to a 50% savings rate on her stipend. Maggie and I end our conversation by discussing how Maggie can get started with passive investing. Let's talk fellowship taxes for a minute here. These action items are for you if you recently switched or will soon switch onto non-W-2 fellowship income as a grad student, postdoc, or postbac. You are a U.S. citizen, resident, or resident for tax purposes, and you are not having income tax withheld from your stipend or salary. Action item number 1, fill out the estimated tax worksheet on page 8 of IRS Form 1040-ES. This worksheet will estimate how much income tax you will owe in 2024 and tell you whether you are required to make manual tax payments on a quarterly basis. The next quarterly estimated tax due date is September 16th, 2024. Action item number 2, whether you are required to make estimated tax payments or pay a lump sum at tax time, open a separate named savings account for your future tax payments. Calculate the fraction of each paycheck that will ultimately go toward tax and set up an automated recurring transfer from your checking account to your tax savings account to prepare for that bill. This is what I call a system of self-withholding, and I suggest putting it in place starting with your very first fellowship paycheck so you don't get into a financial bind when the payment deadline arrives. If you need some help with the estimated tax worksheet or want to ask me a question, please consider joining my workshop, Quarterly Estimated Tax for Fellowship Recipients. It explains every line of the worksheet and answers the common questions that PhD trainees have about estimated tax. The workshop includes 1.75 hours of video content, a spreadsheet, and invitations to at least one live Q&A call each quarter this tax year. The next Q&A call is this coming Friday, September 13th, 2024. If you want to purchase the workshop as an individual, go to pfforphds.com/QE-tax. You can find the show notes for this episode at pfforphds.com/S19E2. Without further ado, here's my interview with Maggie Canady. I am delighted to have joining me on the podcast today, Maggie Canady. She is a current graduate student at UC Irvine, and today we're doing a budget breakdown, and we haven't done one of those in a really long time, so I'm very excited about it. So Maggie, would you please introduce yourself to the audience a little bit further?
Yes. Hi, everyone. And hi, Dr. Emily Roberts. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Maggie Canady. I am a rising second year clinical psych PhD student at UC Irvine. I'm originally from Dallas, Texas. I received my bachelor's degree from Harvard in 2020, where I majored in psychology and minored in dance. Really broadly, my research interests include understanding the risk and resilience factors around trauma exposure, as well as learning about culturally responsive trauma interventions.
Okay, fascinating. And actually, now that I know that you had a little bit of a gap between finishing undergrad and starting graduate school, let us know what you were doing during that period.
Yeah, so my first year after I graduated, and obviously graduated during the pandemic, I received a traveling fellowship from Harvard, and I was supposed to be in Southeast Asia for a year. That obviously couldn't happen. So they said, okay, we'll still give you the money, but you have to choose and create a project that stays in one state. So for my first year, I was interviewing and photographing mixed race individuals and doing a kind of like ethnographic project about mixed race identity. And then after that, I worked full time as a research assistant at the University of Southern California.
Okay, and I'm trying to sort of place some numbers on those kinds of jobs. Like, did you take a pay decrease when you started graduate school from that assistantship position?
Yes, I did. So at USC, I think I was making about $48,000 a year or $49,000 a year, and then went to a graduate student stipend after that.
Yeah, go ahead. Tell us, what is your stipend right now?
So this past year, as a first year, I made a total of $29,125. And that was for 9 months of working as a part-time teaching assistant, which is defined as about 20 hours of work a week. I also received a diversity recruitment fellowship of about $5,000 when I first started. And then I also received a Merit Award to help with summer costs, which I received at the beginning of the summer for $3,000. This upcoming year, I'll make about $35,000, and this is due to the 2022 strike that happened all across UC campuses. So starting this year, the lowest paid workers will make $34,000, and then based on your level of experience, you make a little bit more incrementally. So this upcoming year, I'll make $35,000, which is great.
And that's again for a teaching assistantship, is that right?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Wow, I'm so glad to hear that. I'm so glad to hear that was the effect. And also that you had some bridge funding for last year to kind of bring you closer up to that number that, we'll get to in this upcoming year. That's really, really good to hear. Do you have any sources of income outside of your stipend?
I occasionally tutor and babysit, but it's very like one-off and kind of just if my schedule allows. I'm also a dancer, and I will get paid for gigs occasionally, like music video gigs or performance gigs. But that's more for like my own interest in like personhood as opposed to depending on that as like a source of income.
I see. Okay, and is there anyone other than you in your household, any living beings?
Living beings, yes. So I live in a beautiful, like 2-story craftsman house here in LA, and I have 3 other roommates. One of them is my boyfriend. My boyfriend and I split a lot of the house grocery expenses, but when I pay my taxes at the end of the year, it's just me.
Gotcha. So no dependents, but you do have people, your boyfriend and other roommates that you're sharing expenses with.
Exactly.
All right. Are you currently working towards any financial goals?
So I would eventually love to buy a house. That feels a little bit kind of like of a dream in the far distance right now, just with my stipend and how crazy California is with yeah, houses. But it's definitely in the back of my mind. And when I put money into savings, that's kind of what I'm thinking. I also love to travel. So I feel like I'm always kind of planning a trip or thinking about a trip and having money tucked away for a trip. I feel like when I think about my budgeting categories, that's definitely one of them that I'm always saving money for.
Okay, so you do have some kind of savings rate for this like eventual house goal, and that could be several years away. Are you keeping that money in cash right now in like a savings account, or are you investing it in some way?
So I have Robinhood and I am investing it, but I also have a high yield savings account. And so this is like kind of one of my like tips or things that I learned this year, but my 50% of my direct deposit goes directly to a high yield savings account. And that that high yield savings account is not connected to any of my credit cards or any of the ways that I spend money. So I feel like it's just like this pot of money that is really growing, which is really awesome. And then I will also invest like kind of every other month or so, depending on like my schedule.
Wow. Okay. A 50% savings rate. So once the money goes into the high yield savings account, does it come back out for spending in the present, like for travel, for example, like you just mentioned?
I try not to. I try to really use like my 50% and go from there. But I definitely can pull from it and like have in the past, but I really try not to. I try to not touch it.
Okay, wow. So you're close to a 50% savings rate then. This is something
Yeah.
I've never heard of from a graduate student. So, okay, now I'm very interested to hear how you're managing your expenses to make that happen on the stipend numbers that you mentioned. So that's incredible. Let's start talking about that. So we're going to go through your top 5 largest monthly expenses. And tell me first, are we hearing about these top five expenses based on like your average spending over the last year, or like what you budget, or like just last month, or how did you come to this list?
Yeah, so a couple of them are set in stone. Like my rent, for instance, is set in stone. That's every month. My car insurance, I pay every 6 months. So I just averaged it out for each month, but I pay it kind of in bulk. And then my groceries, utilities, and like flights that I pay for, that's kind of an average. So yeah, my rent is my biggest expense, of course. It's $1,100 a month. So I'm immediately automatically budgeting for that.
Okay, so $1,100 per month for rent. Are you sharing? Okay, just tell me more about the house. Like, how many bedrooms
Yeah.
are there? How many people are there? Are you sharing a bedroom with your boyfriend and then you're splitting it? Like, just tell me how you came to this number and what the house looks like.
Yes, so fair. So our house is $4,500 like total, and there's 4 roommates total, and we split it 4 ways evenly. So we each pay 1,100. Well, we used to pay 1,125 each. But we have like a apartment. It's kind of a long story, but now we each pay 1,100. And we split it evenly. My boyfriend and I share the like master bedroom, the larger bedroom. And yeah, I've lived in this house for 2 years now. We've lived together for coming up on 4 years. It's about like 3.5 right now. And we've always split the rent evenly. Yeah, it's been great. I love my place, and that's also why I'm kind of doing the commute from LA to Irvine, because I really love the community I've built out here. So yeah, 1,100, and that's what everyone in the house pays.
Gotcha. Okay, so yes, because I didn't realize that you weren't close to the university. So how long is your commute?
My commute is anywhere from 40 minutes to an hour and a half. But I usually take the train. And the train is like a clean an hour 20 door to door, and I'm doing work on the train, etc. But if I drive, it varies depending on the traffic.
And do you commute every day? Every weekday?
So during the school year, I commuted every day for the first 2 quarters, so about 2/3 of the year, and then the last quarter I commuted for, I think it was, I think it was 3 days a week. It really just depends on the quarter, and like these first 2 years are the most class intensive, obviously. So I will be commuting every day, and then the expectation is that as classes lessen, more of my research becomes kind of independent. I won't have to commute as much. And so it was like this real back and forth that I went of like, okay, do I move down to Irvine and like, do I kind of lose this community that I have, but I'm closer to school? Or do I invest in kind of my personal happiness and then have this balance? And obviously I chose to stay in Los Angeles. And it's been great. Occasionally I'll house sit down in Irvine, which I guess is also, I don't make money from it, but it is like kind of a relief from the commute. So it is an investment in some sorts, but I'll house sit, dog sit closer to campus.
I'm curious how you and your roommates found this house.
Craigslist. Yeah, so we were living in Echo Park, which is a different neighborhood in LA. And we were looking for a new place that was slightly bigger. So we looked for about a year, really, I think, 8 months to a year. And then my boyfriend found this place on Craigslist before it was on Zillow and the other rental websites. So we were the first to apply. We had 3 interviews with the landlords because they wanted to rent to a family. So they wanted to rent to a family, but we convinced them that, we all have incomes and steady incomes and that we're reliable. So it's been great. They've been great landlords.
Oh, that's really interesting. I'm glad I asked about that. Because I don't talk with too many graduate students who live in houses with multiple roommates, but I think it can be a very cost-effective situation. So anyway, I'm just glad to hear all those details about yours.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I feel like it's just like such a great perk of Los Angeles that there's so many beautiful like artisanal houses, and we have a front and a backyard and laundry and, AC and a fireplace. Like there's so many like, I don't know, homey perks of it. And it is cost effective, which is sick.
All right. Number 2 expense.
Car insurance. So I pay $300 a month for car insurance, which is definitely on the higher end. I recently got an electric vehicle, and it was a more expensive premium because of that. My car insurance expires in September, so I'm definitely going to be shopping around for a cheaper premium. So if you have any recommendations, I'll definitely take them. So it's $300 a month.
I actually don't have recommendations because I just found out that our car insurance company is pulling out of California. So
wait, mine too.
I was using Esurance.
Yes, same.
Yes. Okay. So we will both be shopping around for insurance on our electric vehicles because I also recently got an electric vehicle. Tell me, you too. How did you acquire this car? Because I'm not seeing a car payment on your list of expenses.
Yeah, so I had a little electric car before this one. It was like a little 2015 Nissan, and I bought it on Facebook Marketplace, and it just didn't go the distance. Like I had to charge it constantly, and all of that. So I was selling this car. I put it on Facebook Marketplace, and then after about 3 to 4 months on Facebook Marketplace, someone purchased it. So I had that immediate check. And I had, I'd say about so the car was $37,000. I had this about $11,000 check from the car I sold. So then it was $26,000. I had about half of that money that I could, I had allotted to buy a new car. And then my parents helped me with the last $12,000. So that's how I bought the car full out. And then when I got my tax return in April, I got $7,500 back from that I was able to give back to my parents. So I know that math is kind of hard to speak out loud without seeing it. My parents probably gave about $5,000 to help me just pay it out in full, and I had the rest in savings, the rest with selling my last car, and then the tax stipend.
Yeah, amazing. I guess you probably had a pretty high savings rate during your last position as well, right? Making more money, living in this same place, it sounds like, same people, so similar rent. So I see how that savings account was healthy enough to help you with that purchase. So that's amazing not to have a car payment during graduate school. But hopefully we can get that insurance monthly cost down a little bit. I mean, you and I were probably both with Esurance because it was a pretty good bargain the last time we looked around. But hopefully there will be another bargain that we can both find.
I hope so, yeah.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say about that car insurance?
Yeah, I guess this is more of a kind of a bigger thing, but my parents are huge savers, and I feel I have a very kind of conservative background when it comes to money of okay, I'm going to save my money and really just be aware of what's coming in. And so I feel I'm always nesting acorns or something with my money, which has really paid off with these bigger payments. I think that's where it's coming from of because I know it's kind of insane to have 50% of my income going to payments. 50% of my income's going to savings. So I think that's where that's coming from of this very almost must conserve my resources.
Okay. Well, let's put a pin in that. We'll come back to it at the end of the interview. Emily here for a brief interlude. Would you like to learn directly from me on a personal finance topic such as taxes, budgeting, investing, and goal setting, each tailored specifically for graduate students and postdocs? I offer workshops on these topics and more in a variety of formats, and I'm now booking for the 2024-2025 academic year. If you would like to bring my content to your institution, would you please recommend me as a speaker or facilitator to your university, graduate school, graduate student association, or postdoc office? My seminars are usually slated as professional development or personal wellness. Ask the potential host to go to pfforphds.com/financial-education or simply email me at emily@pfforphds.com to start the process. I really appreciate these recommendations, which are the best way for me to start a conversation with a potential host. The paid work I do with universities and institutes enables me to keep producing this podcast and all my other free resources. Thank you in advance if you decide to issue a recommendation. Now back to our interview. Let's continue with our list. What's your third largest monthly expense?
My third largest is groceries. And so I split this with my boyfriend. But even after splitting, it's anywhere between like $150 to $250 a month. I love to cook, and we're always kind of cooking meals, so that's part of it, and that's more cost effective. But groceries are expensive. Like, I can see the difference even from being here since 2020. Like, it's just crazy.
Yeah, but that number actually seems pretty low to me. I mean, I also grocery shop and cook for a family of 4, but it's 2 little kids, so it's not that much more than, just 2 adults. And we spend quite a bit more than that. So you must be doing something right. Tell us about a few of your go-to meals.
So we have a Costco membership. And so, like, we'll get, like, a rotisserie chicken, like, $5 rotisserie chicken from Costco.
The loss leader?
Yes, love. Big fried rice, stir fry kind of people. I just made, like, a shrimp fried rice, so frozen shrimp, and then whatever veggies I have. And we buy, like, a 20-pound thing of rice, which is awesome. Soups. Not really right now because it's summer, but I'm a big soup girl. And that'll last. Like, that'll be made in bulk on like a Sunday, and then I'll use that as like meal prep for the week. And then I eat like pretty light breakfasts. Like, I'll buy like a pack of like a big thing of yogurt and like granola. Yeah.
So eating out does not appear in your top 5 expenses, but let us know where that falls on the list. Like, are you eating out? How often do you do so?
It really depends on my social battery, which I feel is like this pendulum swing. And so I was in Europe at the first 2 weeks of this month, and like my shopping was like through the roof, like my eating out, obviously, because we were on vacation. And so like when I came back, I like shut my doors, like grabbed my groceries, and like have been cooking, like eating in, just because like I can't like eat out for the whole month. And then when I'm back in LA, like it'll kind of depend on like, oh, okay, I'll feel like, oh, I have a little bit more free time in my schedule, so I'll see more of my friends, and then we'll like go like grab a drink, or we'll go out to eat. And then I'll like feel like, oh no, I'm way too stressed. I have to like just can't see anyone, have to stay in, and then I'll just do that. Yeah, so it really kind of varies. But when I do go out, I try to just like go for coffee or like frozen yogurt or something that it's like still I'm still paying for something, but I'm not paying like $30 for a meal,
Mm-hmm. Especially if your purpose is to see people, then it doesn't really matter how much money you're spending on the food or whatever. It's more having the setting to be together with other people.
Yes, exactly.
And how about takeout or, DoorDash, Grubhub? Or do you do any of that?
So no, my mom owns a restaurant. She's had a restaurant for like 30 years, and I worked for her growing up. And then even throughout college, whenever I was back. And Grubhub and DoorDash just like are so awful to small business owners. And so kind of seeing like behind the scenes, I was just like, I cannot endorse this. So it's like more of a personal value. But I don't DoorDash. Yes. I'd say utilities, they average about $75 a month. It's $25 for Wi-Fi, and then like somewhere between like $10 to $20 for gas, and then depending on the month, the rest of it is electricity. So anywhere, honestly, probably like closer to $75 to $100 a month. Like it really just depends. Like we've had the AC blasting this past month, so it's going to be a lot higher than usual. But then, kind of in the fall and spring, it's very very little, very minimal.
Yeah, and this is one of those areas where having the multiple roommates really, really helps because, yes, your utilities go up a little bit more with the higher square footage, but things like internet, like that's just going to scale down, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Sounds great. And your last expense, the fifth one.
My last one, it's most recently been flights. I've been trying to buy like my holiday flights early, and then like I said, I was in Europe, so I bought those flights. The most recent flight I bought was for my parents actually to come visit me. My dad had a coupon, and then for my mom's ticket, it was $400 round trip. And so, like, kind of going back to that, like, travel as like a bucket for my budgeting, like it's one of those things that I'm like, I will be traveling home for the holidays, or like I want my family to come see me, or I want to go on vacation. So it's one of those things that I'm like, okay, this is where money is going to go.
Yeah, and with a 50% savings rate, nobody can argue with spending a little bit on travel as well.
Yeah.
Tell us about your strategies around buying flights, if there are any. Like, are you loyal to any airlines? Do you use any certain credit cards? Like, how do you work this?
So I have a Southwest credit card, which honestly has not been as great as I expected. But I'm from Dallas, and Southwest has like Love Field Airport, which is 10 minutes from my house. So it's nice to have the Southwest credit card because I'm building points on that, and I try to use those when I can. But the flights are usually quite expensive still. I also have I have to look at the exact one, but it's a Chase like traveling credit card, and that's been great.
The Sapphire Preferred, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the Sapphire Prefer. I love that card. I try to do like all of my expenses on that card, and that card actually paid for my flight to Europe this past time, like after like just spending for the entire year, and I love that. So those are my two. I also have a Amex Blue Preferred, which gives 6% back on groceries. And so I'll just give that back as like a kind of like cash like return. So yeah, those are my top three.
What airline did you use for your trip to Europe?
Oh, great question. I used I think it was I will probably get the name wrong, France Air, or like Air France.
Okay, yeah.
Because they're a partner with Chase, and so I was able to transfer my points from Chase to Air France.
Yeah, I'm quite familiar with the Chase system because I also was trying to be loyal to Southwest for a little while. It's a little bit easier actually with the family because we can do the Southwest Companion Pass, which is a really great like value. Are you familiar with it?
Yes, that's amazing.
Yeah, so like you can always take one for the listeners. Once you earn the companion pass, you can always take one. When the primary person books a flight, they can always take a companion with them on any flight. Unlike some other airlines where it's like once per year. Nope, it's every flight as long as there's a seat available for free, which is amazing. But anyway, the Chase points transfer to Southwest, as you probably know. So I was working that system for a little while, and
Smart.
yeah, seeing where else the Chase points could go because we also have the Sapphire Preferred card. But I haven't gotten into any of the other systems yet. Like I'm not an Amex, so it's something to explore and see what those partners are. Because I mean, using credit card rewards for travel seems to be the kind of the biggest bang for your buck.
Yes, I totally agree, and I feel like I'm like so sold on Chase as like my credit card because of how many flights and like how many points I get that I can then transfer. I've heard that for American Express, like it'll start paying off once you have like the platinum or whatever like the highest kind of credit cards are, and I'm just not ready to spend like $600 a year on a credit card. So I haven't yet, but maybe one day.
Yeah, well, this is really exciting. So you're spending quite a bit on travel, but you're also trying to optimize as much as you can with points and so forth. And it seems like you're sort of using that the high yield savings account that you split your paycheck into as what I would call a targeted savings account, at least to a degree, because you can pull from that account when you have these like large flights or whatever coming up, right?
Exactly. Yeah, you've got it exactly on the head.
Okay. So the question I kind of wanted to come back to is, why are you saving and not investing, given that you have quite a high savings rate and you could be doing some of both?
Yeah, that's a great question. I honestly feel like it's from a lack of knowledge around investing. Like, I know that investing kind of consistently and monthly and like diversifying your assets is the way to go. But I feel like there's still a bit of fear for me there. And kind of going back to this idea of like where my parents came from of like saving, like my mom and I just got into investing in 2020. So it's kind of this new endeavor for both of us. And she's really gotten into investing in the past few years. And for me, like, it's just, I haven't put that like energy into like really knowing what I'm doing. But I feel like that's potentially like a financial goal I can work on, alongside like saving for a house, just because there is like so many benefits, to it. So if you have any advice for me, I would definitely take it.
Yeah, I mean, I said a second ago that you weren't investing, but that's not quite true, right? Because you are using Robinhood. You said sort of inconsistently. What kind of investing are you doing with Robinhood? Like, what are you investing in?
Like I'll invest, I have to honestly go back and like look. It's kind of all over the map. It'll be like Apple.
But single stocks is what we're talking about.
Yes.
Not
yeah,
like
exactly.
ETFs or something like
No,
that.
not ETFs. Yeah.
Okay.
And see, like I feel like I can feel myself like not even really know like exactly like not feeling super confident in like having a conversation about it because it's like a place where there's a big gap in my financial knowledge. So yeah, I think that that's definitely like kind of a next step for me.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I have content recommendations for you.
Please,
Are
please.
you more of a reader or more of a podcast listener?
Um, Podcasts, I think, for especially with my drives.
So there's a very well-known person in the FIRE space, the financial independence and early retirement space. His name is J.L. Collins, and he has a book. If you're a reader, I would recommend his book. But since you're a listener, I would say find his interviews, which he goes on a lot of different podcasts. But he's been on, for example, the Choose FI podcast several times. So I would go find like the earliest one or two interviews where they're probably going over the basics of his book is titled The Simple Path to Wealth. So it's all about this strategy, which is passive investing, which is investing in index funds and ETFs that are based on indices. And so it's a very like set it and forget it kind of investing strategy, which I really like. And it's the kind of strategy that I teach also because it's the most effective in terms of the money that you'll have at the end of the decades, like in your pocket, because you're paying very little in fees and you're not letting your psychology and your human emotions, get in the way of like your investing strategy. So I would go find some interviews with him. Definitely on Choose FI. You can probably just search like your podcast player for J.L. Collins and hopefully some interviews will come up. But Choose FI for sure has him. I might also suggest Afford Anything. That's another podcast name. I bet he's been on that podcast too, although I haven't listened through all the archives extensively. So yeah, just find a few interviews with him and see if you sort of like his argument and his philosophy.
This is so helpful. Thank you so much. And I will definitely check out The Simple Path to Wealth. I have like 2 free audiobook credits for some reason right now, so that'll be one of them.
Yeah. I don't know if it's an audiobook. I certainly hope it is because it
okay.
is very popular. So hopefully they have turned it into an audiobook. But I'm curious whether the author is the one who's reading it or whether they hired someone else. He has a very like deep, like gravelly, like old man voice, which I actually think would be great for an audiobook. So yeah, I'm curious if he's the one who read it or not. But yeah, start there, I would say.
Okay, I definitely will. And if like I'll definitely take a book recommendation too, especially with the summer. I have like like exponentially more free time. So
the one after The Simple Path to Wealth that's also great on investing is Ramit Sethi's book, I Will Teach You to Be Rich. And that's on more broad personal finance topics, but he does have a couple chapters devoted to investing, passive investing. So that would be another good one to read.
Thank you. That's so helpful.
Oh, sure. I mean, you're already honestly most of the way to winning the game by just having like a very high savings rate on obviously a limited income and really dialing in your expenses. Obviously, you've thought a lot about what you value in the travel and so forth. So like you're already doing a ton of stuff really well. And if you decide you want to, devote some of that very high savings rate toward investing, you'll really be able to grow your money over the next few years. And even, this is not like advice, but depending on how far out that potential house purchase is, a savings account might not be the most appropriate place for it. Some conservative investments might be an appropriate place, but it kind of depends on what your timeline is on that front. So it's just something to think about. Like you could do a split, right? You can do a certain percentage into just straight savings, a certain percentage into investing. Maybe some of it's for long term, some is for medium term. Again, with a high savings rate, you kind of can't go wrong with choosing where you want to put that money.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. Okay, this is a great summer project. I'm excited to, kind of go down this route.
Yeah. I hope the listeners enjoyed this because this is a really unique example of like living in a very high cost of living area. But as we were talking about, kind of setting those highest, the expenses that have the potential to be the biggest in the budget, the rent, the transportation, getting those set at the best level that you can and sort of letting everything else fall where it may and doing that strategy of paying yourself first by splitting your paycheck. These are really great examples. So I want to say to the listeners, if anybody else wants to come on and do a budget breakdown, I love doing these kinds of episodes. I want to hear from people all over the country with all different kinds of stipends, and every single one is going to be a very different story, right? So Maggie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'd love to ask you the final question that I end all my interviews with, which is, what is your best financial advice for another early career PhD? And it could be something that we've touched on already in the interview, or it could be something completely new.
Oh, okay, yes. Well, a couple of things we've already touched on. High yield savings account, definitely recommend that. I use SoFi because I had a great offer. So kind of look at whatever has, a great high interest rate. Like I said, trying to like immediately put my direct deposit into savings and into that high yield savings account, so I don't even have to think about it, was like kind of a great like passive or intentional act that now has become like routine. So that was really helpful. I listened to Financial Feminists by Tori Dunlap at the beginning of this year, and I feel like it was a really like great supportive start into thinking about finances, because she really breaks things down and you don't feel like overwhelmed or it just feels like it comes from like a context and a place and a positionality that I also subscribe to.
And that was the audiobook version, right? Because
yes,
she has a podcast as well. I don't think it's called Financial Feminist, though.
No, it was the audiobook. Yes, great gotcha. Distinction. And that's where I learned about kind of like values and having like when you're thinking about budgeting, kind of breaking up the budgeting into buckets and like 3 buckets that you care about. And that was a really helpful framework. And then this is kind of like a small piece of advice. Sorry, I feel like I just had my list, so I was like, oh, let me just say it.
Go for it.
But institutions have money, and like applying for stuff my first year was really fruitful. Like I was a mentor and received a stipend. Like I was a volunteer for a conference and I received a stipend. Just like reading the emails, weekly emails you might get from your institution and just like checking those for additional pockets of money.
Great advice. You won't be needing it as much, right, with the massive pay increase that you're going to enjoy this year, but should still be available to you should you want to access those opportunities. And amazing. Well, Maggie, thank you so much again for volunteering to come on the podcast and sharing your life with us for the last half hour.
Of course. And thank you so much for having this podcast. It's so helpful for people like me. So I really appreciate you.
You're absolutely welcome. Listeners, thank you for joining me for this episode. I have a gift for you.
You know that final question I ask of all my guests regarding their best financial advice? I have collected short summaries of all the answers ever given on the podcast into a document that is updated with each new episode release. You can gain access to it by registering for my mailing list at pfforphds.com/advice. Would you like to access transcripts or videos of each episode? I link the show notes for each episode from pfforphds.com/podcast. See you in the next episode, and remember, you don't have to have a PhD to succeed with personal finance, but it helps. Nothing you hear on this podcast should be taken as financial, tax, or legal advice for any individual. The music is Stages of Awakening by Poddington Bear from the Free Music Archive and is shared under CC by NC. Podcast editing by Dr. Lourdes Bobbio and show notes creation by Dr. Jill Hoffman.